Evening, everyone. I'm Matt Gould, host and moderator for this series, Hear and Be Heard 10 Community Conversations, and I'm glad you chose to join us. These community chats are co-hosted by Red Deer Public Library and the Red Deer Puppetry Collective. Now, for those of you who are regulars, when I say Red Deer Puppetry Collective, our puppets, Chalk and Cheese, usually poke their heads out and shout, "Yay!" But this time we're giving them a rest. That's because we felt that our subject for this evening, racism, calls for a different approach. To that end, the collective decided to create self-portrait puppets, and these are what you'll be seeing in just a little bit. Now, when I taught at Red Deer College, my students created self-reflective poems based on Where I'm From by American poet George L. Lyon. Mr. Lyon is given universal permission to use his piece as a template, and we, the Red Deer Puppetry Collective, have each created our very own personal version of this poem to present to you to kick off tonight's conversation. Now, some of you might be wondering, okay, what has this got to do with racism? Well, we feel that by looking at ourselves, opening up and expressing some vulnerability, we're making room for others to see similarities and commonalities, things we all share, human to human. Our hope is that this experience will bridge gaps and maybe bring us all, I don't know, like a little bit closer together. Tatiana Tilley from Red Deer Public Library got so excited about this project, she's going to join us with her own version of the poem. So sit back, open your ears, your eyes, and your hearts as Red Deer Puppetry Collective and the Red Deer Public Library present You Have to Be Carefully Taught.
Hello, my name is Ash Mercia. I am from books, from Sony and Nintendo. I am from the place my heart can't seem to find. Natural, wild, a calm air entering my lungs. I am from bees, fluffy and fuzzy and warm, productive, creative, informed. I'm from the typical stuff and don't ask, don't tell. From Lori and Sandy, I'm from the buried feelings and the hidden truths. From I detest you and stop crying. I'm from atheism bringing me more comfort. I'm from Rocky Mountain House, Italy, from blood spaghetti and chosen sushi. I'm from the hours of being raised by the Simpsons. I'm from the time my brother drank too much prune juice. The now inaccessible bedroom closets of my grandparents' home, where the history I never properly heard collects dust.
Hi, I am Carol Nault. I am from Shiny Silver Spoons, from Kodak Super 8 and Oscar Peterson on the stereo. I am from the Prairie Gateway to the west, home to the Winnipeg General Strike, the Riel Rebellion, where two rivers meet in the freezing cold and hot sun. I am from homegrown tomatoes, hanging ripe and delicious amongst the tended flower beds. I'm from Sunday roast dinners, and ladies always serve their guests first. And marrying my native lover and becoming a Métis wife, falling in love. I'm from turn the other cheek, but stand up for yourself and others less fortunate. From mind your manners, do as you're told, and talking about my generation. I'm white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, he's Métis Catholic. We both choose Buddhism. I am blood of my blood, bone of my bone. My children are Métis. I must protect them. Torchère, green tomato ketchup, halapchi and pierogies, cream cheese on rye toast. From my own sister saying to me, don't tell people that your girls are Métis. People don't need to know. You won't want people to know. But I do.
My name is Matt Gould. I am from Right Angles and Leaky Skylights, from Major Matt Mason and multivitamins. I'm from the big brown box in the middle of the block. Clean, modern, knees of pants tearing acid yellow jute wall-to-wall carpeting. I'm from light stealing African violets, molting, dusty, cloying. I'm from Look It Up If You Don't Believe Me, and grandparents in attendance Sunday dinners. Can we be excused? Walt Disney's on. I'm from Mavis and Irving. I'm from Hymn Sing and Story Time. From Remember, Indians are lazy drunkards and not to be trusted. And Take the Love and Spread It All Around the World. I'm from the United Church of Canada, white choir smocks and oversized red bows. I'm from England, Scotland, Canada, Amisquatsi-Waskahikan, boiled wheat, butter, pickles, and roast beef, baked beans, and bannock. From mothers all in a rush, if we eat a whole jar of peanut butter, our skin will turn brown like all the other kids, and we won't stick out. Remembrances of her youth. From the once-a-month bloodbath of the prairie beef ring, blue willow china and the ox cart coddled, German-built, English-played, first in northern Alberta, rosewood Bechstein grand piano. Draped, faded, chipped, tucked up tight, waiting to sing once more.
My name is Dan Vasquez. I'm from Bong, from Olympus, and brother, I'm from the apartment, wooden, sunny, loud. I'm from the ivy, always grabbing at things. I'm from Sunday lunches and curly hair, from Louis and Gloria DeLords. I'm from the travelers and overspenders, from we're staying here, from and we're moving back. I'm from Roman Catholicism, kindergarten to grade 12. I'm from the Paw, Manitoba, Chile, Bolivia, Spain. Empanadas, cazuela. My family watching my softball game from the car. Visiting Joey and the Frank in LA. In storage boxes and closets, containers and spare rooms and trucks, the remnants of when we were purely ourselves.
My name is Tatiana Tilly. I am from small warm house in Siberia, from skis and skates and dancing shoes. I'm from frosty taiga and large home library. I am from Siberian pine and berry bushes in my parents' dacha, whose smells and tastes are always with me. I am from wool, cotton, and fur. From Tatiana and Polina, Ivan and Alexei, Maria and Valery, and from women who learn to be like stem and be like steel in a life where we can do so little. From hunters, gatherers, and gardeners. I am from travelers and settlers. From hot pies, hot soups, and hot porridges. Because you have to eat hot meals 3 times a day when you live in frigid temperatures. From 20th century Russia, and from World War II. Beehives of my grandfather and grapevines of my grandmother. I am from the moments of natural beauty and forest basin, art appreciation, and happy dancing. I am a grateful settler in these lands, 12 time zones away from my home.
This land on which we live is the meeting place of Treaty 7 and Treaty 6, representing the Blackfoot, Tsuut'ina, Piikani, Kainai, Stoney Nakoda peoples, and this area is also the traditional territory of the Métis, Nahayawak, Cree, Saulteaux peoples as well. We strive in the spirit of the treaties to keep this a place of trust, friendship, and promise. We acknowledge that promise and welcome you to this place to share in respect for our future together and move forward in a good way. Now, as you know, the title of this evening's conversation is You Have to Be Carefully Taught. And for those of you who aren't musical theater buffs, that is the title of a song from the 1949 South Pacific by Rodgers and Hammerstein. And the song came out, and it was actually a very controversial song because the play takes place in the South Pacific and it's about a mixed race relationship. And one of the characters, this white airman who's in love with a woman who's from the island originally, sings this song and says you have to be carefully taught to hate people who are differently made and look different. So that was the jumping off point for us for the theme for tonight's program. So we're going to start, and each of our guests, our passionate, wonderful guests, have been sweet enough to take that poem by George L. Lyon and write their own version of the poem, I Am From. So I'm going to give a brief introduction of each of our guests, and then they will read their poem. And then after the 3 poems are finished, we'll launch into questions and a lively conversation. Now, of course, I'd like to say, is that okay with everybody? But I can't see anybody, but the 4 faces in front of me. So guess what? It's okay with everybody. Okay, so I'm going to start with Angie Thandiwe, and you were born in Zimbabwe, and she came to Canada when she was 18 years old, and she's spent her life now in Canada, and she's become a Canadian citizen and still is a proud Zimbabwean by birth. She's written a children's book called Living in Different Countries, and she's passionate about justice and equality. And apparently she loves to shop and photography. So Angie, welcome, and go ahead with your version of Where I'm From.
Thank you, Matt. I am from tables in the dining room, from cups and spoons. I am from the cream walls, they smell like vanilla yogurt. I am from the mountains, the Musasa tree whose long gone limbs I remember as if they were my own. I am from Mofu and Chihera, from Miriam and Paurosi. I am from kindness and cooking, and from cleaning before you go to sleep. I am from sit down and eat your food. And if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. I am from prayer groups. I am from Chitungwiza and Zimbabwe Mabwe, Sada and Muriwo, from a farmer who grew everything, Paurosi, a hard worker, my grandfather. I'm from our grinding mill in my village of Chiwota. I am from an extended family. I am from everyone is related. Thank you.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Angie. We're going to move now to Chevy Rabbit, who was born and raised in Ponoka, and you're a member of the Montana First Nation, and you were named one of the top 25 human rights advocates by the former Premier Rachel Notley. May she come again soon, as far as I'm concerned, as well as being named one of the top 40 under 40 by Avenue magazine. You've spent a decade in Alberta advocating for hate-free communities and for LGBTQ inclusion. So if you want to give us your version of where I'm from, that'd be fantastic. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for having me here. So just to be fair, I did this 20 minutes ago, so it's very fresh. All right. I am from Central Alberta, from makeup and technology. I am from a brown home out on the prairies, what smells like home-cooked meals and Gokum's favorite beef stew. I am from wildflowers and meadows, lavender trees, whose long limbs I remember as if they were my own. I am from unconditional love and kinship values at the core. I am from Lavinia and Calvin. I think I did this right. Hopefully I did it right. I am from Lavinia and Calvin. I am from nurture and nature. I am from unconditional support within reason. And I am from you can be anything you dream of. And come in and have some tea. I am from traditional Cree ceremonies. I am from Panoka, French fur traders, pioneer Ukrainian farmers, but mostly Cree ancestry with 2 generations back of Stony. I'm a product of 500 years of European and Indigenous relations. I'm Bannock, Bannock and Saskatoon Pie. My late Auntie Velma was called the first Lady of Montana First Nation. She got the name from the town because her husband was Canada's longest serving chief with over 50 years serving our community. Abstract work, abstract art, created during times of adversity. On my wall of my favorite of my family country home, Chevy Rabbit. I kind of stuttered. I got nervous.
No, that's great.
I realized how personal it was.
No, that's really good. I mean, I think, you know, we're gonna talk for a few minutes about these poems and why we chose to do them once we hear from Jenna. So I'll introduce Jenna, and then afterwards before we leap into like the real questions, we'll talk about why we framed it with these personal reflections, if that's okay.
Yeah, awesome.
Even if it's not, it's gonna be. Okay, so Jenna Ray McFedrin was born and raised in Central Alberta. She's traveled the world, living and teaching in Australia, volunteering in Africa several times. She's a teacher of food sciences at Rocky Mountain House, and you're the proud owner of Red Deer's Rock and Hop and Jazzercise franchise, which of course I used to do Jazzercise, the only guy in the room shaking my flabby old ass. What can I tell you? She's the mother of Chetwin, who is a mixed race child, and she's passionate and dedicated to connecting and creating a fair and just world for him and for all children. So thank you, Jenna, and welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, he was the only one in the room, but he did a good job of shaking it, so it's all good. Okay, so I am from dance shoes, from water bottles and dishes. I'm from the greenhouse with the yellow door. I'm from the shooting stars, the pussy willows whose long limbs I remember as if they were my own. I am from Christmas light tours and camping in summer, from my parents and my son. I'm from family dinners and bedtime cuddles, and from summer gardens. I'm from hard work and respect and a thumper's rule. I'm from sugar cookies and from Red Deer, and I'm Welsh. I'm from pickles and lasagna, and from people that like to discover, travel, and experience new things and meet new people. From the people that value time together.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Jenna. So, so for the 3 of you, I'll just say, and for the people who are watching, one of the reasons we chose to use these poems I am from was not an excuse, but a way to break down barriers and connect by finding these commonalities, these funny little quirks about what we're eating or where we are, even accentuating differences if there are cultural differences that are quite interesting. So we didn't want to hit it with some kind of really heavy kind of thing. We're just hoping that these beautiful words and these personal words that each of us have chosen to use to express ourselves kind of unites us. So let me ask the 3 of you how that felt, because as Chevy, you were saying that it felt kind of personal. So let's start with that and see if that effect helped, in a sense, set the mood and bring people together a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I did it 20 minutes before I started, and I realized as I was reading it, I realized it was very personal, and it delved into like parts of my life that I don't really share, and it's kind of values that I think about. Like when I was thinking about the 500-year relations between Indigenous and European, and it just came out of like just 10 minutes ago, but it's really, that's a lot of our lived experiences as Indigenous people. We are a product of this nation, like 500 years of Europeans coming in and cultural exchanges. I just realized there, it just hit me. So I found I'm like, I'm here. I survived all these different pandemics, smallpox, all these stuff here, and my genes are still here. So obviously there's a purpose. But anyways, yeah. I thought it was really good.
Good. Angie, let's go to you then, Jenna. Just maybe talk about the process of writing the poem, and if you feel that you find it fascinating and kind of connecting, or did we really make a mistake?
Definitely, I find it connecting me to my roots, because I then go into talking about my grandfather who passed away way before I was born, but all I know about him is his name, the business he was into. So it kind of took me back to that memory of my grandfather, whom I actually never met. And I also don't talk about him very much because I don't have too many stories, but writing this poem kind of took me through the process of thinking about him.
Nice, good. So you felt it was a valuable kind of exercise.
Definitely.
Jenna?
Yeah, I guess I kind of, it made you look at what you value too, right? Like when I was picking certain things, you know, some of them were childhood memories, like when they talked about the plants. Like I picked the shooting stars because my parents used to have they're endangered and they grow in the fields at my parents' house. And, you know, so it took you back to some of those, like she's describing some of those home memories. But I also liked when I was listening to everybody else's, there'd be little things that I, like you said, connected with, but also like, I felt like I was part of their home when I was listening to them talk about it. And I just really liked that you could really, I felt that. I felt like I was in their little personal childhood home. And so I guess it was a way to connect to, which I appreciated.
It kind of, for me, just to jump on it again, it, as you say, it creates that intimacy. And I feel that we've been brought into each other's sphere in, as Chevy was sort of saying, a kind of an intimate way, right? We're sort of going like this and saying that stuff. And I think when we're looking at the story of race and the question of race and racism, this is, I think, one of the tools that can be used to start to break things down and say, oh, well, for example, in my history, Chevy, my mother used to work with people, women of all kinds. She was a manager of a sort of a social house, and there were women that came from all backgrounds, including First Nations and people from Africa and white women and stuff that were having problems. And my mom was sort of running that building. And so she learned to make bannock. So we would start to have bannock at home. So that's a kind of funny thing. You were talking about bannock. I was mentioning bannock because that was something that connected me in that kind of sense. And
Oh, can I add something? Yeah, it felt very personal. I feel like I got to know everybody here, and also the ones that before, I kind of got the gist of it. It really opened up into the psyche of the individual and also their surroundings, where they're from. And so it's an awesome icebreaker.
Yeah, nice, good. I think so. Okay, so what did I wanted to do? Oh, so yeah, okay, so I'm going to start, and we're going to start asking some questions and sort of move into the subject. So since the killing of George Floyd, maybe in particular, but of course it's been there for many, many, many years, issues. The topic of racism is heated up, and not just in the United States, where the murder took place, but all around the world. We saw that incredible activation this summer, right? So I would like to ask each of you what impact maybe that particular event, world event, had on you, and how it also affects your sense of the world and racism, and say from each of your different perspectives. So, you know, take a sort of a moment to catch, but each of you will have a different way of looking at it. And that's what we'd like to get at from these three perspectives. So let's start with Angie this time, if you don't mind.
For sure. When the incident happened in the United States, it was very personal to me because I thought to myself, this could be my brother, this could be my son. As a Black woman, you know, sometimes it doesn't have to be an event that is personally affected you, but if you can relate in some way, I think that's personal enough. So I remember me and my friend, we were just talking and we were like, we need to raise awareness. And this is not only for us, it's also for our children. It's also for our little brothers and our little sisters, you know? So we wanted to do something in the community. We were thinking of something really small because, you know, we didn't know how the community would react because you don't know when you're organizing a protest, you don't know who's going to show up, you know? And it's a scary situation when you've had stories about people in the community maybe being called names, being told to go back to where they came from. So it was a scary initiative for us to think about. But I think it's high time we stop having all these thoughts, oh, we wish we could do this. We have to stand up and speak and be part of the change that we're looking for in our communities. So me and my friend, we wanted to have a small protest, peaceful protest, that we could raise awareness. And I remember we started having a conversation, I think it was on a Tuesday or Wednesday. By Friday, we had a program. We had people backing us up and saying we are going to help with the protest. We were expecting 50 people to show up, but on the day we had 500 people showing up to support what we were doing. That was impactful to me because I was like, you know, you never know what you're capable of doing or achieving until you step up and try something. So in our communities, we have lots of young people who have all these ideas, but they're afraid to step up and say something. They're afraid that maybe nobody will turn up. But if there's only one person or two people, that's good enough for a start, you know. We were amazed by the reaction of the community as well, because we didn't expect it. So it was a shock to us when we saw all these hundreds of people showing up and supporting us by, you know, by the town hall there. We're like, what's happening? I couldn't believe it. I had to pinch myself and say, is this really happening in Central Alberta? Because of all the stories I had heard, and, you know, so for me, like I said, it was personal because as a Black person, that was a wake-up call for me. I want to create I want to add to the work, to this welcoming and an inclusive community that we're always talking about. How can I do that? How can I be part of change in our community? So I think George Floyd kind of gave me the courage because I didn't like how he died, and I don't think anybody deserves to die that way. So I think it was eye-opening for many people. And if you are a human being, I think you have to think about the other person who's just died, you know, even if you don't look like that person. I think as a human being, there has to be something that speaks to you and say, you know what, this is not right. We need change in our communities. We need to be human and to have compassion and feel for other people, you know. So I was really happy that we were able to get the community together. And I tell you, on the day, we had people of all nationalities, Black people, white people, Indigenous people. There was everybody was represented, and that just showed me that you just need one person to step up and say, let's do this. And, you know, with time and with patience, I think we'll get where we want to get to. We're not there yet. We still have a lot of work to do in our communities. There are a lot of good people out there, but there are also bad people in our communities. And I think we need to continue working so that we can bring change in not only in Red Deer, not only in Central Alberta, but in our province of Alberta, in the whole world. There has to be change. So I think that's what I can share, that it was personal for me when George Floyd passed away. And it kind of brought a little bit of initiative on my part, and I was able to do something within my community. Thank you.
Good. Thanks. That's, as you say, obviously was a very personal kind of experience for you and a response to it. So yeah, I mean, and wonderful that you had, I think I went to one of those. I can't quite remember, but there was at the City Hall, wasn't it? City Hall Park? Yeah. It was really exciting and kind of motivating, and especially seeing all these young people. Jenna, what did that do to you and have an effect on you and things?
Well, obviously, kind of like Angie said, I mean, when you see something like that, it doesn't matter who it is, it's not right, and it's upsetting. I guess I really struggled with this one because, not by choice, but a lot of my friends are white, and having the conversation with them is sometimes like beating my head against a wall. And I guess it's really shocking to me because they're kind people. Like, I wouldn't pick people that I would think at the core were, awful. But in saying that, they could not understand the perspective. They can't, racism doesn't happen like that in Canada. That would never happen here. Like comments like that, where I was trying to say, like, it does bring concern. And I think it brings to light the fact that these things, maybe they don't happen to that extreme, or maybe we're not seeing them, but that doesn't mean racism doesn't happen here in Canada. And that doesn't mean that these things aren't happening to people because we're Canadian. I'm not saying that, and that's the other part of it. When I speak back or I address these things, they kind of look at me like, well, what's your deal? Because you're not, I'm not a person of color or anything. And obviously my son is, and I worry about him and what things that, whether he's going to get pulled over by the police and maybe searched for drugs just because he's not white. Maybe he looks like he would be having drugs on him, or maybe like these things I think about, right? Mm-hmm. And I do think about that, what perspective does that give? And, and then it was having really complicated conversations with friends about white privilege. Some of them don't feel that actually exists. They feel that, these other small minority communities get more help or more this or more that. And I'm like, but you don't walk into a store and just because of what you look like, someone assumes that you're stealing something, or someone assumes you have drugs, or someone assumes, right, just because of something you look like. You've never had to worry about going into a store and thinking that. Does that make sense? Or worrying about, walking down the street and someone assuming that you've got a knife or whatever it is, or, you know what I mean? You've never had to experience that because you've never been in that situation because of the way you look. And so I guess for me, it brought up a lot of weird and awkward conversations with, people that I care about. And it was good to have those conversations. I'm not saying it's not, but it was definitely a bit of a struggle. And it was a bit of a struggle for me to articulate because they don't see me, they see me as the same, and they're not really understanding me very well, if that makes sense.
Right, so you now have this altered perspective because of Chetwynd, and you're looking at things in a different way. I mean, yes, you are a sensitive person and you're watching this anyway because I know you and know that, of course, you're paying attention to these larger things. But I know that what's happening partly in the white community is that there is this pushback and this denial of any sense of privilege. It's like many of us might have blinders on and say, I don't want to see that, and therefore I don't want to believe it's possibly happening. Yeah. And yet, as you say, we aren't walking into stores. I'm not lost in the country and drive up to a farm and be afraid that I'm going to get shot because I'm asking for directions. And that's happened to Black people in the United States. Someone gets lost, they go up to the house, they knock on the door, and they're killed. Mm-hmm. The thing that I might worry most about where the next ice cream stall is. You know, that's it. That's the amount of worry I get. Anyway, go ahead, Jenna. You were going to say something.
Well, and this even from where I teach, like, I mean, I remember talking to kids and saying, well, I can't get work experience positions because I come from the reserve. So they assume I'm going to steal or I'm not going to show up or whatever. Like, people just make an assumption based on what I look like. And I, like, you know, when kids tell me that, it's heartbreaking. And I guess, so it's not even just black or white or whatever. It just, as a teacher, as a human being, these things bother me, that people just make quick assumptions. And having that conversation with people that look like me, having a different perspective than them, I think it just kind of boggles their mind a little sometimes. And so I'm not saying all my friends are like that. Lots of people are very understanding, but there is still this very silent, they don't see white privilege. They don't see it. And that part I'm having a really hard time with. Anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. Chevy.
Hi. So for me, it brought out systematic discrimination. It really highlighted the fact that a badge can be weaponized against an oppressed group and a marginalized group. And I think for him to kneel on his neck for so long and then do it so brashly, his behavior showed how much that institution got away with oppressed and marginalized people. And through the technology, we're able to see the arrogance of abuse of the police to organized oppression, basically. And so for me, it really highlighted systematic discrimination and how institutions are weaponized against marginalized groups to further oppress them. Like when you look at Indigenous groups, the core of a lot of institutions have been to put them onto an apartheid, onto reserve, take away their kids, like RCMP, the church, go in there, rob these families of them. So you have all of these institutions rooted in the oppression of Indigenous people and the complicity of people.
Complicity?
Now, complicity, yeah.
Yeah.
A double espresso. So I'm gonna go, but for me, it just highlighted systematic discrimination and the weaponization of these institutions against marginalized people. And now we've come at this crossroads in society where all these institutions have to adapt to diverse needs of a growing diverse population. So whether people like it, put their blinders or not on, it's going to happen no matter what. You either adapt or you don't. So
yeah, you know, sorry. Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that people of my generation, because I'm not the same generation of you as you three, and I know that my generation is a big part of the challenge, and that you younger people are coming and you're pushing us, and it's normal. I mean, every society goes through that shift in that birthing, right? Where I'd say to my parents, oh, for God's sake, you're so A, B, C, or D, why don't you get with it? Come on. And now I'm that group where the three of you might be saying, look at old man, why don't you just get with it, right? And that's part of the movement of the world and society. I think just in general, right?
There's structural changes happening all the time. Growing population changes, the needs of a population change. Yes. And what used to work in the past no longer works now. Back then, it might have been good for commerce, like for money, to oppress Indigenous people, push them off their land. But nowadays, like those kind of values no longer serve are who we are as a society. We're a diverse population, and everybody deserves respect and dignity. And if an institution can't fulfill those needs, then it needs to either adapt or we need to replace it. Like for me, that's what it is. For me, that incident just highlighted it, that we are on a cusp of change, and that a lot of these institutions and systems have to adapt.
But and I'm just going to jump in for a sec before I ask the next question. Isn't that in lots of ways like super exciting?
Yeah, it's,
you know, yeah, you're here, and there's the push and the push, and you know, that's that energy that Angie was showing when she's saying, okay, I'm gonna phone a friend, we're gonna organize this thing, and suddenly half the world shows up. And Jenna's saying, look, you're being brave enough to have these conversations with your friends and say, you know what, you have to move over because this is the way the world is going, so shut up. I mean, honestly, right? I mean, that's it. There's no such thing as, you know, when you have an anti-racism march, for example, how can you even have people on the so-called other side? There is no other side. Everybody has to move this ball forward.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sorry, but this year was the 10th annual Hate to Hope, well, last year, and I dedicated it to Indigenous people and people of color, because over these 10 years of advocating, every year showing up to rallies, every year going being a crazy person all over this province, trying to say that we have to respect each other, like, it's crazy. Like it's when I think about how some people are raised to hate, it blows my mind, because I come from a family that sees everybody's equal and everybody deserves respect, and that's the way I was raised. So like when I see people just being hateful, it just blows my mind.
yeah. So I'm going to move to the next question, and this is one that Angie sent me. So thanks, Angie, for that. And if you want, again, you can start the answer for that. So this was a really fascinating question for me. And the first were you, as you were growing up or as a teenager, did you ever even think about the word racism? Was it even on your radar as a young person? And I think that goes to where we were situationally, right? So Angie, we'll go to you again.
Right. For me, racism, in fact, I think I learned about racism, the word racism, when I came to Canada. I was born in Zimbabwe, and growing up there, I knew that we have different races all over the world. We had white people in Zimbabwe. We had people, different nationalities who had made Zimbabwe their home. But I had never had anybody say, oh, somebody was saying like racist comments to them. So I left Zimbabwe when I was 18, coming to Canada. But when I came here, I think my first time walking into a classroom, that's when I actually realized I was different than anybody else. Because in that classroom, there was only like 2 Black people. And as time would unfold, I started learning about racism, that there are people who actually hate other people just because they look different than they do. And it was shocking to me because, 18 years.
Everybody's frozen, except for me.
No, I'm not.
Maybe it's just you.
Yeah, you're just frozen.
I see us all.
I think we are good, so I'll continue. Yeah, so it was shocking for me to learn that people can be racist, and starting to learn the language, that there are so many different initiatives that are trying to get communities to work together, people to love each other, to like each other. That was shocking for me, because that was never something I even worried about when I was growing up in Zimbabwe. I mean, from what I remember, we had a few people who were minorities, and we actually liked them more, because we wanted them to feel at home. So it was a totally different game when I came here, and hearing that people are getting in trouble with the police because they look different than what a typical Canadian would look like, that was shocking for me. So I guess Matt has been dropped. Maybe you will read.
I was going to say, I'll play off of you, Angie, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So I found the opposite. So when I was in Africa, I was the only white person, and that was the first time I really felt like I am out of place here. Like, and one guy started yelling at me in Swahili. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew I better get out of there because it was not a good situation. And I was definitely the one that was out. What an awful feeling. And I remember, I will never forget how I felt. And we always say that about kids, like, you'll never forget how you make someone feel. It doesn't matter who they are, you'll never forget what they. So I remember how that felt, and I remember feeling, oh my God, this is so awful. So it's interesting, right? Just because in your country you would probably be, and I mean, I don't know how often, or if you ever went to South Africa, I mean, obviously that country has a whole other system for racism, but yeah, in there too, you could feel the tension there, which was really weird, right? But how often unless you go to somewhere like that, would a white person here ever feel like that? You just wouldn't. So yeah. And I really liked what Chevy said earlier about like treating people with respect and dignity. I think that that's the biggest key, right? It doesn't matter who you are, it's respect and dignity. I think that, you know, pushes you through. So anyway.
Okay, well, I think I'll go. So I think I was fortunate enough not to experience racism in Ponoka, which is odd because when I talk with my best friend Catherine, she's a counselor, she here, and we've been best friends for a long time. Her experience is completely different than mine, but I felt very supported from my small town. And I actually didn't experience personally racism until I went to Red Deer College. And when I went to Red Deer College, there was, my community was on the news a lot. There was like, and I had no idea, like Muscogees used to be Hobima, there was like gangs and the media portrayal, like the whole community was just being stigmatized about, you know, because the oil money went away. There was no more oil money, though, and then suddenly, first the community started being portrayed as something it wasn't. Like a few bad apples suddenly made the whole community look bad. And so I was in these classes and I can hear people who were coming from Provost, all these different small towns. And I was sitting there and they all thought I was Asian at the time. And then and they were talking about Indigenous people and all these derogatory things. And I can hear, and I, at that time, was quite naive. I was only 17 or 18 around there. And I just went to Red Deer College and I internalized it. I had this shame. And so I tried my hardest to blend in for a long time. But personally, growing up, I didn't experience racism, but I definitely felt it in Red Deer College. And then when I got so upset, I decided to do something about it. And I went to U of A to learn about indigeneity and learn about all of what happened to Indigenous people through quite a bit. And of course, I got assaulted there for expressing myself. So I felt like I got assaulted at U of A for looking how I look right now. But I think my upbringing never prepared me for violence. I was never raised to be hated. I was never raised for violence. I was raised in unconditional love and respect. And when I see other people, I think about, you know, we're all equal, and it's weird. But yeah, so my upbringing never really prepared me for racism until I got to college and I had to educate myself. And then I started becoming more aware that a lot of lived experiences in Alberta experience racism. Indigenous people are targeted. There's microaggression, racism, all these different things. And I think even now, I think if the money goes away from a community, and if it's and maybe people were being nice because there was money at the time, I don't know. But I think racism is all over. So yeah, I don't know. I think I went off topic. I'm kind of thrown off because he's not on here. But
no, Matt just texted me. He's like, I can't get back on. I'm like, well, if you text me the questions, I'll just continue. But I like what you said though. Like, I kind of forgot about that part too. When I was growing up, you know, like he was talking about Matt's generation. And so my parents would make some comments, like some kind of racist-y comments. And I'd be like, it felt wrong when I heard it. I was like, I don't feel like you should say that. Or my grandma would say something like really inappropriate. And I'd kind of look at my mom and I was like, is that like, do people talk like that? Like, is that okay? Like, it was weird. And I think sometimes it was, it's just generational. Like that was acceptable to speak like that now. But yeah, I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know how to address it because it's your grandma, or it's your parents, or it's whoever, or your aunt. And so you're like, do I say something? Because they're supposed to be showing me what's appropriate, right? But in their time, that was okay to use certain language. And I'm like, that doesn't, it was definitely odd for me, but I just knew it didn't sound right and it didn't feel good to say something like that.
Yeah, and I feel like I grew up with lots of different races and within our family, and with all just multicultural and multiracial. And so for me, everybody was very respectful. And I think if I ever heard a comment like that, I would, even back then, would maybe correct them. I don't know, because I'm thinking about it. Would I not? No, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. But I think those kind of conversations never happened when I was growing up. Like, it was always about, not even about race. It was I think I really lucked out growing up into Ponoka too, which is really rare because I was doing some self-reflecting this year, and I was doing focus groups for some other projects I'm working on. I realized that a lot of people in Muscogees experience high racism. And so I think, yeah, I just lucked out on that part. But I think those kind of conversations are normal. And I think when I was at Red Deer College and I heard the way they were talking about Indigenous people, and I was a little bit ashamed of it because I felt like, oh, are they talking about me? They did say it so confidently, like, oh, natives are lazy, or all these derogatory jokes, right? Which is not true, because the Indigenous people I know growing up are hardworking, they're proud, they love their families, and they're resilient. So it's like, in retrospect, yeah. I just think we're at a crossroads in society, and I think it's so weird. I think like this whole conversation is about if you're raised to hate, right? So I think a lot of the work has to be within the non-minority population, because it seems like a lot of the minority population, we understand that everybody is respected and loved. I feel like it's always to do with the ones who are hateful are European descendant. It seems, not all, because I have lots of good allies and all my events have allies, but I feel like we're always educating mutual respect on with a hateful population. Sometimes it's a small part, but I feel like a lot of other, like, people of color don't seem to be. It's like they are respectful, because we're all, yeah. I'm rambling now.
I think you're right. I do think I have experienced sometimes a small amount of the other way. Just, yeah. And I think, it's people's experiences. I remember teaching, and there was a girl from one of the outer reserves and she didn't want to sit next to anyone white because she was worried they were going to take her things and make fun of her. But obviously she had a negative experience that then influenced how she acted in my room, which I was kind of like, whoa. So it was really weird to kind of re-bridge that gap, I guess, and kind of reteach, both sides of that conversation. But
yeah, I think if you experience a trauma when you're younger like that, of like being bullied, like microaggression, and then very passive, the way it's worded, like, oh, you have nice cheekbones. I know, a compliment, but not really a compliment.
Yeah.
There's bullying that goes along with that. It's very subtle. It's very below the radar.
Yeah. Okay, so
and
Matt,
I'll just also add that subtle racism is more dangerous than what we can actually see, because when it's under the table, you feel it more because you're alone. Maybe when you experience it, but when it's out there, okay, we don't always blame like the U.S. and say, oh, racism is only in the U.S. But they can see it, and then people can support you. But if it's under the table, like in Canada, then it's more difficult for people experiencing it.
Yeah, and just to add to that, but polite racism is dangerous because you don't know if it's lethal or if it's like very callous. But like brash racism, it's there. They're being hateful. You can just see it. Polite racism says, here's a helping hand, but my intentions are horrible. If that makes sense.
I always struggle with when kids use certain words and they're like, oh, well, so-and-so, like, my friend who's whatever, multicultural, whatever, he uses it, so it's okay for me to say it. I'm like, part of the reason why these people take back these words is to take the power out of them. And so sometimes I'm like, that doesn't make it okay. They're just trying to take the power away from you guys using them against them in a negative way. So, and that one I struggle with a lot in a school setting. But okay, so Matt's next question, I don't know if you guys want to move on. He said, I was going to ask about the disturbing signs of white supremacy in Alberta, and what ways do you think the gap between people can be bridged? Does someone want to go for that one?
I can go first real quick, I guess. I have to get going in about 20 minutes. But I think I'm idealistic. I think everybody deserves respect and dignity. But obviously there's groups out there that don't see it that way. So I think bridging the gap would be just about educational awareness, but then we're beyond that now. Like, I feel like, how many educational stuff do you have to have? How many tragedies do you have to have for people to wake up? So we're at a crossroads, like another death, another tragedy, another instance, and they're bombarded with racism, like bluntly right in front of you, but you still consciously make the choice to hate. So what do you do from there? I don't know. I don't know yet. I have to really think about that, because we're at a crossroads. you cannot say you don't know about racism. You cannot, no one can play blinder or like that. There's no way. There's information everywhere. You're bombarded with it. You're either a horrible person or you're not.
I totally agree with you, Chevy. It's either you're a racist or you're not. It's high time we stop sugarcoating things and saying, oh yeah, you know, because I mean, gone are the days when we'll do that. I think it's high time we'll continue helping those who are struggling with acceptance that this is the reality of our community. It's not going to change. We are going to be a multicultural community, whether you like it or not. It's not going to change. But how do we live together in peace with all these different cultures? You have to maybe come with an open heart, and like you said, Chevy, you have to be respectful towards other people. You know, they're not doing anything to you. Maybe they're just minding their own business. You mind your own business as well, and everybody will be good. And for those who are doing all those protests or those who are setting up, I think it's important to continue the work. At the same time, I think we should also think about our safety, because you may be having a protest and then somebody who's hateful would come and like do like something that's damaging to the people who are peacefully protesting. And that's not acceptable, but it can happen. So we also have to put safety measures in place when you plan those kind of things. But I think it's high time people be nice because, I mean, everybody else is nice around you and you're the only person who's like hateful. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else to add. I agree. I struggle, again, from my perspective, just bridging the two, right? In terms of just getting people, like, I know what you're saying, the information's out there, but it's just like teaching an old dog new tricks, I guess. Like it's it's kind of a struggle.
I think for a strategy, what you can do probably is because society is going to progress and waits for nobody. Diversity is coming no matter what. This is a diverse planet. So maybe just highlight our allies, the ones like Jenna, who are, and Red Deer Library, who are doing great things for our communities, and highlight those, because no one can play ignorance. We're beyond those days. No one can play. We're now I guess they're either horrible people or not, and then we'll focus on the good people. The good people who want to work together and coexist. That's our team. That's the society we want to create. We want to create a diverse society that coexists together and respects each other. So I think if a strategy, like there's all these protests all over there, well, maybe don't show up to the protests, because they're going to protest no matter what. They're probably angry, probably do something crazy, the white supremacist ones. Maybe we just focus on the good people with good intentions, who have good hearts, and build them up and build the kind of society we want, because that's the only thing you can really do, I guess. And continue challenging institutions that we work for, organizations that we work for, be the change maker within it, be an ally. That's the best we can do on an individual level.
Yeah.
And I think with the new generations coming, I think there's more hope. Maybe they are coming into a community where people are acting differently than 50 years ago, than 10 years ago, than 2 years ago. So hopefully that will make our communities a better place for everybody.
Yeah, and hate is heavy. Like, hate is a heavy burden. I cannot imagine the people who are so hateful, who want to go out there and hurt someone simply for being different. That's basically when it comes down to it. We're all the same. And I think that hateful person, I feel bad for them. The only thing you can do is wish them well, because there's not wish them well, but, wish that they make better choices. But the reality is, hate is heavy. And I think if we just continue focusing on creating our community, and continue allying and partnering with people who are like-minded, who see other people and other humans as mutual respect, that's the kind of team we want to build.
So Matt is trying to reboot his computer, but just in case he doesn't get back on here, he also wanted us to just quickly chat about fears from your perspective and things that give you hope for the future. I don't know. Let's start.
I think for me, I would say the fear is all the kids of color who are being born in Canada right now. Canada is going to be the only home that they've ever known. For example, my children, Canada, they were born in Canada. That's the only home that they have known, right? So if they don't feel at home, where else are they going to feel at home? So that's a fear that I have for not only my children, but children of other minorities as well. And I just hope that people will be able to create a better environment for them. You know, it may be different for me because I would say, okay, I wasn't born in Canada, but what about my child who was born in Canada? This is home for them. The hope that I have, I would say, I've seen a lot of young people this year standing up for what's right. And I think it can only get better with the younger generation changing the story of, of racism in our community. So that's the hope that I have, that the people that are coming up, and those will be policymakers, those will be teachers, those will be the people in charge of these institutions whereby some people are experiencing racism. So I think that's the hope that I have, that the upcoming generations will change things for many people.
I guess that's really good. I like that. I think I'm in the same mindset as you. But my fear is that another tragedy will happen, and in 10 years from now, we'll be at the same. Nothing will happen. It'll be too long. Like, I'm a person who wants it now. Like, let's get it done. I'm like, don't you see that we're all like, and I'm worried that nothing will change in 10 years. Another tragedy, or there'll be continued violence. That's my fear, because that's the worst case scenario. But my hope is that we'll continue educating the new generation, continue being the change, setting the tone, setting the examples. And my hope is eventually the haters, the mean people who hate us for being different, will filter out, and go away. Because the reality is, we have lives to live. We have to go get groceries without getting attacked. We have to go to school. We have lives to live. We have bills to pay, and we don't have to worry about our safety just because somebody hates us for being different. It's so silly.
Yeah, and I guess I just wanted to add to that, kind of like Angie. I guess I just hope, obviously, for my son and for other kids, that they have these people that accept them and will stand up with them when something awful happens, and that they're not alone when it happens, because I'm not always going to be beside him to stand up for him. And I guess so that's my hope, I guess, is that, like you're saying, Chevy, less and less of the haters and more of the people that stand beside others, and that that people unite and support each other. And I guess the more people that support each other, and the more that will happen, and the more we'll move forward. So that would be what I would say. I don't know. That's all Matt told me. And I know Tatiana said she would wrap it up. So I'm going to let her do that.
Well, thank you, Jenna. Yes, I would like to thank you all, Matt, Angie, Jenna, and Chevy, for a fantastic conversation that we had today again. And I'm sorry that Matt was interrupted, and he's actually joining us.
I was like, he felt really bad about it.
Yeah, so he is back. So Matt is back. So I will let Matt to wrap this conversation up, because
I'm here.
He's right in. Yeah.
Jeepers, the whole world blew up. Boy, I could just scream, and I'm just throwing things around, but I'm sure you had a fantastic time. How was it? Good? Were there comments? Did people show up, and were there questions, or? Okay, well, fine. I mean, there we go. Boy, we've never had this happen before, and it's embarrassing, but I'm glad the three of you, of course, are super capable and able to handle whatever's coming. Boy, I'm not worried. So I want to thank each of you for joining us and then taking over when I disappeared, which is the best thing. So I just wanted to, again, thank you very much. And I'm sure sorry I missed a lot of that stuff. So I just wanted to say that Charlie, Cheese, and Chucky Chalk, our regular puppets, are going to be here next month for our conversation on April 13th, where we're going to be saying one for you and one for me. And we're going to look at this unholy climate mess that we've gotten ourselves into. So it's going to be ripe for a lot of conversation. And you're going to meet a new puppet next month. So hold on to your horses and your britches or whatever. So Chevy, Jenna, and Angie, yay! Thanks like 4 million.